So let me begin our discussion with German. You work every day with gang members. You were once a gang member yourself. Why do you think, given your background, that you're effective working with young people? And what does this work mean to you? And how do we know that it's working?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank God for His grace, because I never thought I'd see myself out here. And yeah, I do work with gang members. I work with United Players. I do reentry. I work with youth that are involved in juvenile justice. And majority of the kids that I work with, they are gang members. And I was formerly a gang member. I grew up in San Francisco. And we all have different stories. Guys that are involved in the gang, everybody has a different story, different background, why they joined the gang. And I say, you know, my thing is, I believe it worked for me to be working with kids that are involved in gangs because I experienced it. I worked with the best of the best while I was incarcerated. I worked with all the shot callers in there and be able to pick their brains apart and see, because I had a goal while I was in there. It took me 10 years before I started to transform my life. But in the meantime, I had a goal that I wanted to be out here. I wanted to be given an opportunity. I was doing a life sentence. In 1979, of course, I was involved in a gang and caught a murder case. In San Francisco, was sentenced 15 years to life with 2 years enhancement for the gun. And I came in 1979. I got out in 2007. I've been out for almost 5 years. And it was always in my heart that I know that I found a solution while I was incarcerated to be able to be effective with these youth that I work with. And there's different stories, like I say. You know, some of the kids join the gangs because they want to fit into something. Some, they don't have no family. The father, the mother working. There's nobody there for them. And guess what? They begin to hang out. And for a lot of kids, there's a lot of idle time. And it's innocently. It ain't like I'm going to join the gang, I'm going to be bad, I'm going to shoot you. You know, you grow up that way, hanging out and just chilling. And next thing you know, you're cutting school, you're doing certain, and it escalates. And that's how it begins. That's how it began with me. But working with different kids that we have, now the game's still the same. What I'm saying, gang's still the same, but the players have changed. The people that are involved in gangs have changed. And I noticed this, and I kind of look back and I say, some of these kids are savage. You know, I can look in their eyes, and I can just see these kids have done some way out stuff in their lives. But the thing is, what works for me is to get their trust, knowing where I come from and understand them. I don't tell them, drugs is bad, this is bad, this is bad, just to be able to listen to them and come back where it began. Because where it began, if you can figure that out, you can solve it. And I have to go way back. Why did I join a gang? Why was I so intrigued with this stuff and the power? I think what's attracted me after a while, first it was just chilling and kicking it, and later on it was the power that came with it. There was no money involved. There was nothing involved. It ain't even about the drugs. But we all, like the kids that I work with, have different stories, and we have to adjust when we're working with these kids. We have to be able to find out. We have to be able to get the parents involved. Some of the parents migrated here. As for my example, my mom couldn't speak English. So we came to America, and guess what? I run circles around them. Because they couldn't speak English, the teachers couldn't relate to them. And so what I did is just said any kind of story. But we need to get the parents involved in what's going on with the kids, especially when they're young. And I say that because I experienced it. And my proof that it works, it doesn't work just like that. Because I talk to a kid, I speak with the kids, I got to share that love with them. I got to share interest with them. And I worked with a couple of gang members. I worked with in the high school. They were referrals to me, but they never knew they were gang members, but I knew they were gang members. Now the gang members is blocks. You know, I said, man, things have changed here. You know, you guys isolate yourself, like with the gang member, they isolate themselves. They make their freedom, I mean, you know, their radius so small that they can't even go nowhere. They just go to school, come back. But the thing with me, with the youth that I work with is just be able to love them, be able to take interest in them and listen to them. And that's all it takes. It doesn't take a miracle. It doesn't take you yelling at somebody, just communicating. And sometimes all they need is information, you know, information. I share my life story with them, and I tell them, it's like going through the maze. And sometimes you go through these mazes, and there's a dead-end street, right? And so I'm just coming back from the maze, and I'm giving them information. You know what? That's not the way to go, because right there's a dead-end street. There's nothing there. There's no trophy for you. There's no certificate for you. And even if you represent your block, there's no statue for you that they put up there because you were the gangster of the year. So, and I know it works, I know, but not, I mean, it doesn't work for everybody. But if I can just save one, I know I saved a lot. I saved the community a lot of heartache. Can you imagine just saving one youth and the crime that he would commit throughout those times? If it's just one, it's worth it for me.
Commander Beal, we hear a lot of discussion about the role of gang interventionists and violence interrupters. How should San Francisco Police Department's Gang Task Force work with these programs, in your opinion, in your experience?
Okay, well, I'll tell you, I became the commander of investigations a year ago. And before that, I had worked in many different investigative units. I'd never worked in the Gang Task Force. So it was new to me. And what I saw and what those men and women do, I thought was nothing less than amazing. You see, what the Gang Task Force does is that a majority of their contacts that they have with the community and with gang members are really about information sharing, about talking, about getting to know the people, the families. They do a lot of work in the intervention field as well as the prevention and also obviously the enforcement. What the Gang Task Force has to do, what the men and women that work there, they have to build those relationships. They have to build trust. You can't do that sitting behind a desk. You can't do that behind the confines of a police radio car. You have to be out. You have to talk. You have to get to know them when they're young. You have to get to know them when they're hurting. And that's what really amazed me. I'll tell you, this past Christmas, I went into the Gang Task Force office and it was loaded full of Christmas toys. And I asked them, what is all this about? What are you guys doing? And I come to find out that they've adopted families in some of the worst housing projects in our city. And they, out of their own funds that they put together, will go out and give young kids gifts and presents. That builds those bonds and builds those relationships. And what they also do is we work with the CRN, the Community Response Network. That is a CBO under the guidance of the Department of Children's Youth and Their Families. And they're made up of former gang members that have been in the life. And what we need to do, what I needed to do when I first took over as that commander, is to build that relationship and forge that relationship. I asked them what was going on. I met with Deanna Oliva Rocha of DCOIF, and I asked her, what can we do to make this better? What I did then was, after our discussion, I brought in all of the district station captains to meet with the CRN personnel, the actual former gang members. I brought in our Gang Task Force, and I told them, we have to work together. We have to get to know each other and build some trust so that when we have an instance of violence, a homicide, a shooting, that we can work together to do the prevention piece of it, to prevent any retaliation that may occur out of emotional anger. And what we've decided then is also we've learned that the reason why the CRN is sort of cold during the at the scene of an incident. The reason why CRN do not communicate with the officers is because, as Mrs. Leap said, they're in a very precarious situation. They themselves are working with the community in a much closer environment than an officer is, and they cannot be perceived as a snitch. They cannot be perceived as working for the police department. But however, they are there to calm down the emotions, to calm down the anger. And what they do then is, for example, we have a shooting or a homicide, CRN will respond out to the hospital to be with the families, because that's where the emotions run highest. And that's where any talk of retaliation may occur. The CRNs then work with our social workers at the hospital, but also with the officers at the hospital to identify where the retaliation may occur next, so that we can start to take measures to saturate, to prevent, and to interrupt any violence that may occur as a result of the incident that just happened. This is a component or a piece that has really been building. It's been building over the last year. And actually, before speaking here, I polled 4 of the district station captains of Mission, Bayview, Ingleside, and also Northern District. And these are the 4 districts that are most affected by gang violence. And to the person, they all said that they appreciated what the CRN did. However, they wish that they were there more often. They needed to see them more. They needed to have more of them. And that's all comes down, and they needed to build that communication. And that all comes down to funding, obviously. It also comes down to training and trust, and to be able to have the CRNs talk to the officers. So what we did was I built in a program where CRNs would go out to the stations and address the officers at lineup, the actual officers in uniform. And for many of them, that was hard, and for the officers, because they had arrested some of these individuals when they were actually younger. But now the officers had to learn what the CRN's role was and how their role can actually help us and help the police department, help the community. The other piece of this prevention is also with, I'll put our police department, the San Francisco Police Department, up against any department in this country, because I think under Chief Sir's guidance, we are probably the most active community-oriented policing police department of anyone in this country, of any department. I've seen, and I tell you what, Chief Sir puts his money where his mouth is. He's out there with us. He goes to the high schools, to middle schools. He talks to the kids about staying in school, staying out of the gangs, staying away from drugs. We have officers that have a wilderness program, a fishing program. There's PAL. There's a number of things and organizations in place to start to make change. And I think we've seen a lot of this dividend over the past 3 or 4 years. In 2008, there were 98 homicides in San Francisco. Since then, we have dropped that number almost in half. And I think we continue to see those dividends being paid as we continue to work with the community and work with the kids. So in closing, I just want to say that your gang task force, the men and women that work for you, I know on a daily basis are doing an amazing job. They're part of the community policing aspect of it. They're not hiding behind the scenes. They're out on the street. They're building those relationships. And we as a department will continue to build those relationships as long as we stay with the plan that we have in place. Thank you.
Now, Gino, you grew up in the Bay Area, and you've experienced what might be termed as gang life. How do you define the term gang, and do you think people understand what makes a person a supposed gang member?
Well, yes, I grew up in the city of Richmond, right across the Bay Bridge, and Richmond has this stigma associated with it for being known for violence. Growing up in Richmond, I never looked at it as I was a part of a gang. I always thought that the term gang was something that was manifested through the media and law enforcement for numbers, in my opinion. It was more so of a community. I didn't go to school and meet somebody and I lived in Pinole and he was like, yeah, I'm from this part of Richmond, why don't you come to my neighborhood? And I joined where he was from. No, I lived on this block. This is where my grandmother's house was. This is where I was born and raised. And when I walk outside, what people may see on TV was right there at my front door. There was the killings, there was the dope dealing, everything was right there. I didn't have to walk around a corner. I didn't have to go to nobody else's projects or hood. It was right there. And it was a community. It was people that I walked to school with since kindergarten. We just grew up together. It wasn't like there was no pamphlet handout to us. It showed us how to conduct ourselves as a gang, what to wear. This is how we're gonna show people who we are. It was nothing like that. It could have been someone had a fight, a school fight, and we may be at the mall and we see that person we had a fight with, and it just went from there. But that's no difference from the Army and the Navy having they bar fights, So I didn't see it as it being a gang. It was just a community that unified together to support each other. Whether that was, even though it may have been in a negative way, but it was still support because most of us didn't have that at home. I didn't grow up in a stable household, and none of my peers grew up in a stable household. None of my peers know who their father are. Or their father is dead. So most of us raised by either a single mother or our grandmother. And in return, the block I grew up on was a very notorious block. It was well known for violence. That was a reputation. My brother, he's 4 years my senior. This is who I looked up to, my older cousins. And my brother, who's serving 15 years for manslaughter currently, he had a notorious reputation. He was real big throughout the city, associated with violence, not for having the most money or anything like that, but he had a reputation for violence. And in return of that being my brother, I had to succumb to pros and cons to that, which was the pro was, a lot of people would mess with me because of who my brother was, but then the con was there was people that wanted to do harm to me because of who my brother was. So his enemies became my enemies. It wasn't a choice, but it was just more so, it's just how it was. I can walk to the corner store and somebody can be like, that's old little brother right there, let's get him. And it comes to the point to where you get tired of running. You don't run, you fight back. And that's just how it was growing up. At the time, I didn't see it as being wrong. I just saw it as a way of life. What I think people define as a gang, someone now with dreadlocks, someone would just automatically adjudicate that person and say, oh, that's a gang, he must be a gang member right there. Or you can't see it, but I have tattoos all on my arms, my neck, and my hand. And none of my tattoos are gang associated or street or block or turf associated. They all tell a personal story in my life. But someone will look at me and say that's a gang member, but someone else, it can be that person expressing their artistic side. But for me, I'm considered a gang member. So I just think that it comes to a point to where it has to be a level of understanding and communication from our peers, community leaders, the school system, politicians. Everybody plays a part.
Eric, you've worked as a police officer in the LAPD gang unit, and now you're a prosecutor, and you're the head of the gang unit in San Francisco that prosecutes all the gang cases. How do you see the gang problem in San Francisco, and what is your goal as an assistant district attorney in prosecuting gang cases?
Imagine you're 21, you're from Mississippi, you've gone through the police academy for 6 months, it's 1989, and you're now working in Los Angeles. And after being a patrol officer for just a few months, you're placed on the crash unit, the gang detail. And you've arrested a youth And instead of taking him to jail, you take him to his mother. And the mother looks at you and says, can you threaten him physically? Can you make him more afraid of you than of the gang members? The academy doesn't prepare you for that. But I take that experience and I realize in the gang environment, most of these youth are coming from single-family households. I also realize that in the area where the gang violence is most prevalent is great citizens of the community, San Francisco, LA, New York. 99% of those citizens are great and they're afraid and they're being terrorized by certain youths. So as a prosecutor, I take this experience and figure out how do I want to enforce gang violence, especially here in San Francisco where it's turf-oriented. So I break it down into 3 categories. You have the individual who's not fully immersed in the gang lifestyle. He's just an associate. He's someone who's hanging out. He's the one who doesn't have all the gang tattoos. He's the individual that you see in a picture at 14 or 15 holding the assault rifle for the older gang members who are behind him. For that individual, we do try to work with community-based programs. I have met with DCYF. I have met with Alberto of HOMI. I have met with the African American Steering Committee. And in all those individuals are people who have been in this violence, and I say to them, what can we do to make sure that this is the individual who doesn't go to prison? This is an individual who doesn't have the strike on his record. This is an individual that there needs to be consequences, but prison is the right answer. So for that individual, we try to find a way to keep him out of the lifestyle, to keep him out of the prison system. However, then you have the second individual, and I was glad to hear Gino say this, it's the individual who does crimes not for economic means, but for someone who's trying to increase his status in the community, for someone who doesn't really care about anything but being notorious for gang violence. For that individual, we have to have certain types of remedies, and that remedies is not CBOs, that remedies to a district attorney's office is community safety. And for that individual, we have to have consequences. However, it doesn't mean that we have to enforce his prison sentence to the maximum of the law. We have what we call a STEP program, which increases the amount of time you're going to do in prison. For a robbery, it can add an extra 10 years. For a home invasion or a carjacking or shooting into a car or to a house, it can add 15 to life. And then for just a regular felony, it can add 5 years. For that individual, we don't always seek to try to get the extra 10 years, the extra 15 years, but we do want to take that person off the street. And we hope that that person realizes that, listen, you almost spent the rest of your life in prison. You've gotten a chance now. It's up to you to see what you're going to do with that. And then we have the third group. The third group is the group of individuals that are committing the most violent crimes. It's the individuals that together as a force, they are enforcing their will on the community in the Bayview, in the Western Addition, in Mission. Those individuals are addressed in a different way. Through our office, we will do an indictment. We'll indict 5 to maybe 10 gang members. The feds will also do the same thing. They will indict maybe 10, 15, or 20 gang members. And by doing that, it's our hope that we have taken a group of individuals away from the community to protect the younger individuals. And the reason I say that, and what I mean by that, is that, for example, the indictment that we did was 10 gang members in Bayview. And we only went after the 10 most violent gang members, the ones that were committing murders, the ones that were committing robberies. Within their gangs was another subset of individuals that were doing burglaries, that were doing grand theft persons. There were juveniles. Those aren't the individuals that we went after. We went after the most violent ones. By getting the most violent ones, what happened, especially in the Bayview and the Western Addition on the 3rd Street corridor, and also at 24th and Mission with the MS-13 indictment, there was a lull. There was a lull of homicides, there was a lull in robberies, and better yet, there was a lull in retaliatory shootings. And then what happened is that the younger individuals at that time were laying low. They laid low for a little while, but then what has to be done is you have to find a way to address that lull when it occurs. And that's what we need to do, find a way to have intervention when certain of the most violent members are taken off the streets, and then they're the ones who can be helped. those are the ones we need to find a way. And what we look at is we look at the context of the individual, the external factors, and we try to find out what's the appropriate remedy for that individual. Thank you.
Maddie, you started an organization, the Healing Circle, that helps parents who have suffered the death of their child or children by violence. Tell us, what motivated you to do this?
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here. First, I want to thank you, Jeff, for inviting me to this panel, giving honor to God for allowing me to be here today to do this work, because if it was not for him, I could not be here. I do this work, and I won't just say me, because it's not just me. It's over 300 families that we represent here in San Francisco alone with the Healing Circle. It's the reason why I do this. I do it because my son, George C. Scott, was murdered here in the Western Addition, July 17, 1996, a day before his oldest son, who was at the age of 5, his birthday was the next day. His birthday present was getting the notice that his dad had been shot and killed. This is the reason why I do it, because 300 families, over 350 families here in San Francisco alone, of that I know of personally, that are members of the Healing Circle, cases have not been solved. Because Maggie Lord, who lost 3 sons to gun violence in the month of August, every 2 years, that is the reason why I do it. I do it because Betty Cooper lost 2 sons in the Bayview to violence, and it still remains unsolved. Because in 1996, when my son was killed, the same year Tupac and Biggie was killed, there was 96 homicides in San Francisco. And everybody seemed to think that it was just another day in my community. No one knew the pain I was suffering. No one knew what I was going through. No one knew how this affected my family, my children, my community. No one seemed to care. I do it because what happened in Columbine should have happened in my neighborhood, and it didn't. There should have been counselors and people there. There was no one there for me when this happened to me. There was no counselors. There was nobody coming to my house to ask me questions about what happened. They already labeled my son in the paper as a gang member. They labeled him as a drug dealer. No media came to me to ask me about my child. They just labeled him. I do it because the people in my community seems invisible, and it seems unfair. I do it because I want justice. I want to see the person who killed my son. I want to look him in the face and ask him, why? Why did you kill my son? What was so horrific, or what did he do that would allow you to shoot him point blank with 4 bullets in the face? What would make you do such a thing? I want to meet the individual to let him know that I've already forgiven you. Because if I hadn't forgiven you, I wouldn't be here today. I have to forgive you, but I want to know why. And why do I want to know why? Because I want to get you healed too. Because hurt people hurt people. And apparently you are hurting. You had to be hurting that night to shoot my son in the face like that. And you knew him. You ate at my house. You and him spent time together in jail. And I put money on your books. So I want to know, why did you kill my son? I want to know why. I want to know why the community didn't step up. The community saw it. Everybody was present. I want to know why no one came to say who did it. I want to know why. I want answers. Like all the 300 mothers that we represent in the Healing Circle, they ask the same question. I want to know why, along with the over 30,000 unsolved homicides since the 90s, over 30,000 unsolved. So that's over 30,000 families that I represent that want to know why. And we're the Healing Circle for the Soul Support Group, and we believe in healing people. So we go inside of San Quentin, we go inside of San Bruno County Jail, we're in the juvenile justice system. Why? Because all entities, the youngster is in juvenile, his mother's in child chiller, or 850 Bryan, and his dad is doing time in San Quentin. So the whole family is incarcerated. So we want to heal the whole family. So that's why we go in. This is our 4th year in San Quentin prison of facing perpetrators, lifers, murderers, face on with them. Because we believe in empathy, and we believe that this violence is a learned behavior, and it can be unlearned. And it's been given proof by going to San Quentin that it works. Restorative justice does work.
Elizabeth, you've been on both sides of youth intervention. As a teenager, you were a recipient of services, and today you're working in youth development and empowerment. What do you think the answer is in terms of reducing gang violence and preventing gang involvement among kids?
Hello. Well, first, I just want to, again, give thanks for another day here and just the opportunity to share this space with everybody and all the beautiful courage that it takes to be up here, and a lot of energy to the Healing Circle as well. And yes, I've been on both sides. As a juvenile, I was in the juvenile hall and went through that whole system myself. And I've worked through tattoo removal and a bunch of other youth development programs. So I would say through personal experience and being raised by a single mom and having my dad in prison and all that, so and now pursuing in my education, I would say that there is not one answer. The answer is that there isn't an answer. It's a multi-layered approach, and I think that you've brought that, by bringing this conversation forward. Is that it's not just a law enforcement perspective. It is not just the community-based perspective. It is not just a researcher perspective. It is a multi-layered approach, and I think first and foremost, what we do have to consider is meeting youth where they're at. Yes. Meeting if we're talking about perpetrators of violence or whatnot, or youth that are system involved or involved in quote unquote gangs, and we need to meet them where they're at. And as everybody has said, pain and hurt produces more hurt, right? And so I think that what is fundamental is addressing that pain and not really looking at folks in a punitive way as saying, oh man, this guy, he's a beast, he's notorious, so we gotta lock him up, That person is hurting because his mom might be locked up, or his father's been in and out. He might have been abused, And I think that what's first and foremost, that we need to meet that individual, meet that individual's needs. What is that pain that is going through? And I'm pursuing a master's in social work, so I have that lens, that we need to heal our communities and take those answers upon ourselves. And so I would really, everybody has already said, I think we share the same perspective, but definitely besides meeting youth where they're at, we need to create community-anchored solutions, and that involves, a discourse with policymakers, law enforcement officers, and whatnot. But I think also as people of color, we need to be accountable and be good, positive role models to our youngsters and greet them on the bus and not be scared of our own people. Sometimes, we be clenching our purse and we stereotype ourselves and we oppress ourselves in that way. I think that, cross color lines. We need to be accountable, and we need to respect each other and walk with integrity and greet our kids. Those are our kids. You know, that's our community, and so we need to be those role models for those kids, because if we lock ourselves up in the ivory tower, in the institutions, we're not providing that what are we providing for them? We're not providing those alternatives, you know. And so yeah, I feel like, hearing from the brothers out here, the work that UP is doing, and a lot of the work that community agencies like the Center for Young Women's Development is like, they're out there and they, are turning it out. But you don't have to be a community-based agency to be a positive role model, right? And so I think that a smile goes a long way, and if a kid, just because of the base of how he's dressed, he emits fear and people demonstrate that they're scared of him, then what do you think he's gonna do, So I think that that's one of the different approaches. I also think that it's really important to be flexible as community workers or as law enforcement, as social workers. We really need to be flexible because things change, and there isn't just one solution. Kids might take 10 steps forward. You might be working with them as a case manager, and they might make such significant progress, and then something goes down in their home, or their cousin, might have been shot. Something goes down, and then they take 8 steps back. We need to be able to be flexible with them, and be there through that process, and not just say, hey, I'm not working with you anymore because you let me down. And I think that's really important as well, and not to be rigid in that sense. And I think collaborations are very important as well, in a non-hierarchical sense. So if we're talking about bringing everybody to the table to develop those community-anchored solutions, then youth should have the same importance as the district supervisor, as the police enforcement officer, as an executive director. That's a real approach to community-anchored solutions, and through that we build real community. And we have I have respect for my brother over here, my respect for my sister over there, and you have that, you develop that accountability, and then an integrity amongst one another. We're not scared of each other in that way, and we're more able to express ourselves and really develop real solutions, especially in a time where the budgets are cut left and right. The only thing we have left is our human relationships, because honestly, we know health and human services are the first things to get slashed. And so by really developing those relationships with each other, I think that it will go a long way. And lastly, partnerships with local business. I know that that's really important. Just, instead of being shunning our kids out or monitoring them as they walk in, why don't you offer them a job? And developing those partnerships could also just lead to an array of other things. Prevention, that kid could, be a conduit for the youth in his community and be, prevent theft maybe in that store. Who knows?
I'm now going to ask Professor Leap to ask some specific questions, and then we're going to get to your questions in just about eight or 9 minutes. And I'll ask the panelists to keep your responses brief, because we want to get as much interaction as possible. Georgia?
Okay, but you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to go off script for 30 seconds. Sorry, Jeff. Because there's a person here in the audience, and I meant to mention her during my keynote, and I didn't. And it's someone that you all should try to talk to during a break or during lunch, because someone like her should be on this panel. And it's the one person missing. And it's a public defender. And this is someone who worked as a public defender for 19 years in Los Angeles. She's now the director of legal services at Homeboy Industries. Now I'm going to embarrass her. Her name is Ellie Miller. She's sitting right there. And there she is. Public defenders are legal ministers. You are. And you're part of this picture. Okay, now I'll go back to what I was supposed to be doing. Forgive me. I'm going to we've heard everybody's contribution. Now I want to talk about what's working and what's not working. And I'm going to ask each of the panel members to speak the truth to one another. So let me direct some early remarks. Maddie, you have suffered unimaginable pain. And I think I'm going to make an assumption here that I can speak for the audience in saying, I cannot imagine what it would be like to lose a child. From that pain, from your community organizing, what do you say to Commander Beal? Things have changed. It's not 1996 anymore. What's going on? What do you say to him? What does he say to you? And I'm going to ask you to keep the remarks brief. What would you say? And Commander Beal, fear not, I'm going to give you a chance to respond. You're hearing about the CRN and all these things. What's your reaction, Mandy? What do you say to him?
What I say to Commander Beal is there needs to be more police sensitivity training in SFPD when it comes to victims of violence. Because oftentimes, many of our parents that are on the scene when this happens, majority of them get arrested. And they don't understand the crime scene. All they see is their child laying there in a pool of blood, and they want to do is get to that child and touch him, not knowing that they may damage a crime scene. I would like to see, Commander Beal, more sensitivity training with the police department and learning about the victim's family, maybe from the CRN perspective, or us who are present when it happens in the healing circle, because we're there too when it happens. We know the first thing we want to do is get to that family to prevent any other further violence, and that is an intervention. I would like to see that happen.
Commander Beal, how do you feel? You heard that.
Well, first I want to start off by saying that we do have sensitivity training. We have 32 hours of that at our police academy. However, you're correct. It is unacceptable for any parent to be arrested at the scene because they're just trying to be there for their deceased child. I personally, I can tell you for a fact, I've never seen that happen. I've never heard of that ever happening. I would say that they're not being arrested. They're perhaps being pulled away for their, not only for their, it's for their own good too. They're being pulled away. They're trying to be they're being calmed down, and they're being assisted. And if they're being put into a police radio car, they may be driven to the hospital, maybe taken to another location, maybe be with other family members that can help them. But I can assure you that I've never seen one or know of one that's ever been arrested at the scene like that.
Okay. All right. Now, as I said, we want to have a conversation here. So I'm going to turn around to Mr. Fleming. And as you can see, we're going to kind of go back and forth. Mr. Fleming, what would you say to German? What role can he play? You talked about the 3 groups of individuals. And you mentioned that first group, the youth who are on the edge. And you mentioned the second group, the group that would have step-by-step sentencing. Where is there anywhere for someone's skill set, like German, with his skill set, to assist you in that effort?
I like the question, and I'll tell you why. I think that the CBOs and the groups that are working with the youth are doing the best they can. However, I feel that sometimes you need tough love. And what I mean by that is that they need to set guidelines for these youth and make them understand that if they don't go according to the program, they're going to be out of the program. Mm-hmm. One thing that I like to see, especially the youth that's on the edge, when that individual, what happens, the individual will get arrested, and I'll look and I'll decide whether I'm not going to file charges. And a lot of times I don't file charges. And what happens is that person's released from jail the second day, and then he's off and he's back in the street and he's back in the community. I think there should be somewhere within the police department or the sheriff's program for someone like Jeremy to meet with that person the day he's being released and to set up a program for him. So I think that would be a very effective means there for him to come and intervene. And as dealing with the violent youth, I think that they need to make them understand that they've done something that there are going to be repercussions for, and there are going to be consequences, and that they're going to have to go and serve their time, but not get lost in the shuffle. One thing about prison is that it can have two effects. One, it can make someone come out and want to be a more productive member of society, or they can become more integrated into the gang lifestyle. When you go there, you have the Nuestro family, you have the Mexican mafia, you have the Black guerrilla family. What happens is these individuals can go in and they align with these prison groups, and now they come out and they're more respected in the community in the wrong aspect, and then they're going to do something more severe. So I think we need to, with German and other groups, also, once these people go to prison, don't lose touch with them. So meet them when they're being sentenced, but then go meet with them more often while they're in prison and keep them focused on the program for when they get out.
I love something you just did, and I want to applaud you. You said, he needs to, and then you corrected yourself and said, we need to. That may be subtle, but we have to all be thinking along those lines. Okay, so German and Gino. German, you're recently out of prison, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And Gino, you've grown up in Richmond, an area that is seen as, is labeled gang infested. When you listen to this, when you listen to Eric Fleming say these things, how do each of you react? German, you say first. What do you think of what he's saying? Could you work with him? Could you do that? Is that enough? Is tough love the answer? And then Gino, I'm going to ask you as well. What do you think, German?
I think we have to have some kind of understanding of one common goal. Our goal is to make our community safe, violence-free. That's our goal, right? But the main thing is working together and to know that we are working for a youth. We're trying to better his life, trying to find resources, trying to make him a better person. Some of these kids that we work with, they don't have no understanding what a father is. They don't have no understanding what a mother is, what a son is, what a kid is. I think those need to be defined. And that's what's missing in our society. And two, when we incarcerate somebody, we have to do something for them. I was incarcerated for 28 years. I've seen guys that are 18, 19, get sentenced to 4 or 5 years in prison. When they come out, they're worse than when they were in prison. So the thing we need to do, like you say, be in touch with the individual that we work with during the time that they're going to their hearing or during the time that they're going sentencing. But we need to provide something while they're incarcerated. And the thing that I experienced in prison is, you just wait for the time to go by. There's no criteria of you, when you get out, what you need to do, whether you need your high school diploma or not. The time just clicks. When your time is up, you go. You ain't got to do anything. You ain't got to work. There's nothing you have to do. You can stay in your cell. And the majority of the guys, they do that. So when they get out, all they know is they get involved with other gang members in there and get worse. So the thing we have to do, and if we want it to work, I believe everybody is redeemable. I really believe that. And if not so, I wouldn't be here. And I know I'm making an impact in our society. I know that. I know the things that I talk to these kids work. But the thing that we have to come as a community, we have to come with a police officer, with a probation officer. Sometimes that's the problem right there, is the status. When I'm ready to go to juvenile hall, I have a problem getting a pass. And I go there all the time, and just to be able to communicate and make contact. And the same person that's giving me the pass don't want to give me a pass all of a sudden.
Right.
So we have to come together as a community
Right.
and set aside the status, set aside the power that you have and the authority that you have, and come together to work for a common goal to make our community better.
There is a theme emerging, even as we're listening, about leveling the statuses in these collaborations, that everybody is equalized. I'm hearing these words over and over again. But I want to go back to something Eric said. Gino, tough love. Does that help? Tell the truth.
Negative.
Okay. Why not?
because I mean, tough love. When you get tough love in the household, you can tell that it's genuine. Not saying that Eric isn't genuine, but I would have to, and just like any other kid, would want to sit down when there's no cameras around and really see where his heart is. Is it just a job and a career base to where he's trying to elevate in the ranks of his career, or does he really care, or is he going to take a position in D.C. and forget all about what he started here? So that's something that I would definitely care about. And another thing that we have to understand, that these kids are not scholars. Like, they're not someone that come from an educational background or was taught that in their household. So they don't know how to differentiate how to make the right choices. They just know what they've been taught. And I'm speaking from personal experience. When I went to high school, and I graduated a 1.78 at a GPA. When I did high school, I went to, we was like the teachers. We ran the school, literally, it was your east side. I went to Kennedy High School in Richmond on Cutting Boulevard, and it's surrounded by 3-4 different hoods, to where there's constant shootings during class, after class. We had to have our varsity football games during school hours, not at night like any normal high school. We couldn't have it at 7 o'clock because of the potential danger that it possessed. We shot dice in the classroom in front of teachers. Teachers allowed this. There was constant substitute teachers, lack of books. So this is what we inherit this, so we take that onto the streets. This is what they're teaching us. So as long as our household is dysfunction, so was the school system was dysfunction. And not saying that it's a total reason for why I and others turn out the way that we turned out, but it plays a part. So just like I have to be held accountable for the choices I make, so does society have to be held accountable. I keep hearing the term gang up here, and like I mentioned earlier, or let me elaborate more so on that. In the Black community in the Bay Area, it's community. It's not gangs. There's no Bloods. There's no Crips. There's no, there's no GDs or Vice Lords. Those are gangs. Those are, in Georgia Book, the people that she talked to. You can move up in the ranks as if you're working for, Apple or IBM. You can move from regular employee to CEO. In the Black community Bay Area, it's not like that. No one is saying, okay, you go do this, and then when you come back, you're gonna give me this, and it's not structured like that. There's no one saying or telling you how to operate. There's a term in the Black community on streets called a one-man army, and a one-man army is just someone who acts alone and go into another community and just terrorizes his enemy. He didn't bring nobody with him. He's called a one-man army. He don't have to report to nobody on his hood or on his turf where he grew up, none of that. He do what he wants to do. Now, I don't know if that's worse than a Bloods and a Crip that has a hierarchy and a chief of command, but at the end of the day, it's not a gang. It's a community, and I know that I'm not going to get the word gang abolished from the media and nobody, but I just want to clarify that, because as long as you keep putting a label on it, it's going to somewhat have a negative connotation towards these kids, particularly in the Black community.
We're now going to go to some of your questions, and the first one is for Georgia, and it's what happened to Bobby? Did you help him? And was he prosecuted for the drive-by shooting?
When I tell this story, I'm asked this. And by the way, before I answer the question, and I'm sorry, Elizabeth, we didn't get to you, but I also want to thank all the panelists as I sort of pitted them against each other, in a very intentional way. And that wasn't meant to be hostile so much as to say, we all need to listen to one another's points of view. And I think what Gino just said about what happens when the camera is turned off, what happens when we're not here sitting on a panel, is the most important work we're going to do. Now, what happened to Bobby? It's an interesting story, needless to say. I intervened, and I was young, and what I did not know intellectually, I made up for in energy. And I intervened on the basis that he was a child that had been subjected to incredible abuse and was very much a kid in the child welfare system, which happens to many violent youth. Hurt people hurt people. I intervened. He was never prosecuted. He was 14 years old. He was put into what would be thought of now as a psychiatric facility. It was a child's psychiatric facility. He underwent all kinds of treatment, training, came out, went back to school, really went through recovery, and then graduated high school, went to community college, and I'd like someone in the audience to guess what profession he wound up successfully going into.
Law enforcement.
Law enforcement.
Yep.
So, and he was not with the LAPD. He was with a smaller police department for 30 years. He has since retired. He has been married twice. He has raised 4 children, and he has lived an extraordinary life. He truly has. And I'm grateful for having had him in my life as sort of a guidepost. And I do think it's sort of the ultimate irony that he turned out to be a police officer.
Okay, we have some other questions, very, very good questions, and I wanted, we don't have much time left, but I want to work these in to get a response. I work at San Quentin Prison. They segregate inmates based on color and gangs. Why do prisons not work on educating inmates on social relations, racial tolerance, and why don't they find a way so the different races can get to know each other?
I'd like to answer on that.
Okay.
Segregation has always been a big problem in this country. I'm a product of Jim Crow, growing up in New Orleans. And the thing is, our motto in the healing circles, each one reach one, teach one. We believe in that, and we believe also that education is the key, and that we all need to sit at the table. I don't believe in segregation for as inmates. I think they need to tear that barrier down and put people together no matter what. In the healing circle, when we go inside of the walls of San Quentin, it's not just black inmates. It's Hispanic, Pacific Islanders, white, it's Native Americans, it's everybody in that room. And yet when they leave that room, they go back to their communities that's segregated, and they too don't like it. So they don't like it, and it's a barrier that has to be torn down. We know it works. I know it works personally, being in there for the last 4 years with the inmates. Everybody, we even sit, we make it a point that everybody mixes up even the seating, that you don't just sit with a black person or a white person, or we're all in this together. It's about all of us or none of us. That's the bottom line, and it has to be that mentality.
German?
Yeah, I think it's a way to control the prisoners, to divide them, and it takes the pressure out the guards and everybody else. When you come in, they say we want to stop violence, we want to stop this in our prison system, but yet you promote violence by just segregating. When an individual comes, the first thing they ask you is, where are you from? What's your nationality? Okay, you want to sell you with a black. Okay, we'll sell you with a black. And that's how they divide and conquer. And that's the way the United States is made of. That's how it works. You know, you go North and South Vietnam, for instance. They divide people so that the pressure won't be on them. And that's how I see the system. You know, I see it in that bigger term with North and South Vietnam. But I see it in prison, how they divide inmates. You know, and it's scary if inmates unite. And they don't like that. When I first come to prison, it'll be a big thing if I went and sat with a black. It'll be a big thing if a white, a Caucasian sat with the Asian. And now they're frantic. They're saying, man, they're getting together. And we only did that one time where everybody got together, and we got what we wanted. When you unite, you can conquer. And they divide them so they conquer them.
Next question is for Commander Beal. How can a community-based organization contact the Gang Task Force for speaking engagements or other collaborative efforts?
It's real simple. If you call 553-1484, ask to speak to Lieutenant Jim Miller, and make an appointment, he'll for sure have any amount of his officers be at your engagement.
And is there any effort to formalize a relationship with a community-based organization so they understand what the expectations are, you understand what the expectations are, as well as the limitations?
No, I say honestly, right now, we do not have that effort in place. It's a good idea. It's something that I know we talked about. It's very important for us to understand exactly what the CBOs are doing, what their goals are, and it's also, I think, important for the CBOs to have specific training for their individuals so that they're all doing the same thing and doing it right. And also, they should also have some guidelines and some sort of criteria to evaluate their successes, either in both a quarterly and a yearly basis.
Okay. Thank you. Last question for Elizabeth. What are the types of job opportunities that are available for at-risk youth, and what are the funding opportunities?
Right, you guys already know, it's like silence. There aren't many job opportunities for youth right now, and with the way that funding is currently, it's only being reduced. So what we try to do is think creatively, and so we try to create like internship programs where we really try to infuse youth through culture and identity, and through this positive identity, we utilize a lot of like just pre-Columbian, non-Western ways of trying to have youth identify. And through that knowledge, also, we infuse like political education so that they could make a good choice, and we stipend them. But there are other like stipended programs like Oasis or like Conscious Youth Media Crew. And so while there aren't many opportunities for you, there's MyEat, but not everybody could, for example, work for MyEap if you're an AB 540 student. And all the work permits that are required also require a social security number. So for the undocumented youth in the city, those are all opportunities that aren't available to them. So I think alternative pathways are a good way to go, such as those internship opportunities that also use these venues as an opportunity to have kids reflect and hopefully make positive choices by, leading them to a path of self-determination.
Right, and MyEap, for everyone, is the Mayor's Youth Employment Program. And Mayor Ed Lee has made a commitment this summer to employ as many youth as possible and to triple the number of youth opportunities for youth. So that's something that we hope will help. I want to thank all of our panelists today and give them a round of applause.